Hey everyone, I am Heather from Green Mountain Fabric. You might also know my sister's site that's called Vermont Craft Mom. This is my very first quilt pattern. It's called the Pinwheel Stars Quilt, and I made a super quick video to just show you how I go about making it. I know that quilters all have their own unique strategies here, but this video will go along with the PDF pattern instructions for you. This is a brand new channel. This is my first video that I'm actually putting up on the channel. So I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. I'd love it if you liked it. And then if you stick around at the end after I discuss everything that we did here, I also just have an extremely quick video about how I went about doing the fat quarter version of it, and how I just shift my fabrics around so it kind of looks random, but it's not super random. Sometimes when you try to make it look random and then you're halfway through and you're like, oh, but these ones are actually together, so now it doesn't look random. So I just have a little trick that I do that makes it look random, but you don't end up accidentally having pieces together that you didn't want together. So yeah, I would love any questions or comments. Like I said, this is my first video that I'm posting. This is my first quilt pattern, so I'm always up for kind, constructive criticism. So yeah, check it out. Thank you.
Okay, so our first steps are going to be making sure that we use the right pieces here. We're going to put D and E. We're going to make our flying geese. And then with H and I, we are going to do our half square triangles. And our other first steps will be attaching F, B, and G. So in the pattern, it gives you two ways that you could do the half square triangles. This way is the bigger block, and you can do 8 at a time, which is really efficient. Or there's also this way, the smaller block, which does 4 at a time. So with this one, you sew 1/4 inch around all 4 sides, and then you're just going to cut along the diagonal. This one, I used white chalk so you can see it really good here. You draw a diagonal line from each corner to corner, and then you stitch 1/4 inch from each. You'll cut on the chalk lines that you did, and then you'll also cut like this, which the best way that I find to do that is after I've cut the diagonals out, I will line up this line with the bottom here, because I know that will create a 90-degree edge, and I'll go through there. These will all be separated, so I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so these are the 4 and these are the 8. Other than the chalk on them, you can tell they look pretty much the same. These, for the 8 one, I actually sized it up a little bit because they're all going to be trimmed down later anyway. So see, those are a little smaller, but you're going to open them up and you're going to want to trim them anyways and get rid of the dog ears on the sides. But yeah, pretty simple. Then for half square triangles, it's my preference. I'm left-handed, so that makes a difference, but it's my preference to do it like this. I double check the size that they need to be, and I actually line up that size along this dotted line right down here and right here. And I always cut the sides that get rid of these first. I don't know why, I just do it that way. I also have a set of fussy cut squares, but I just thought I would do it on this in case other people don't. But you want to make sure that you line up the diagonal here so that when you trim it, you don't have, these are even. You want these to be even. That is the whole point of that design. So yeah, trim all of those. So these are our E pieces and this is a D piece. So you're gonna need 4 of the E's per 1 D. And what I'm gonna do is just take my chalk and I'm going to draw a white diagonal line on all 4 of these. And then I will be lining them up like this, perfectly here. 1, 2. My lines will be like this. And I will stitch a 1/4 inch away from the line on both sides. Okay, so as you can see, I lined those up like that, stitched a 1/4 inch on both sides of them, and now I'm going to cut on the chalk line that I have. So now you'll have cut those and you'll press these away, and you will put these ones on each just like this. And you're gonna sew a 1/4 inch on both sides of that line as well. Okay, so you sew on a 1/4 inch away from from this one line, and then you cut them, you will press them, and then you will trim them. So to trim these, the most important part, in my opinion, is finding your center notch for your width and making sure that this top part right here has a 0.25 inch seam allowance. So for me, the most important part is making sure that this is centered for what your width is supposed to be. And then you also want to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the top here so that when you sew it together, you have that perfect point. I then also look at the line that's across the bottom because I want them to be as even as I can get them when they're trimmed down. So right here, I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm in the middle, and my line across the bottom here actually could just be touched a little bit. So then I'm going to cut this part, cut this part, then rotate it so that your perfect 90 degree is there now, and line it up with the exact measurements that you want. This edge. See, these are not quite perfect, but they're very close to perfect. Let's see which one. Well, you know, perfect's usually out of reach for me. But so those are our 4 at a time flying geese. So next we are going to sew F to B. We'll press it, then we'll sew the FB to the G, and we'll press it, and we'll have these strips for all of the FB and G pieces. Okay, so we have all of those sewn together. We have flying geese sewn together, and we have half square triangles sewn together. So the next step will be piecing the actual blocks. Okay, so all of our first steps are done. I still have A and C, which I did nothing to. I have my GBH sets right here. I have my flying geese and I have my half square triangles. I divided these into halves. For me, I have 64 of each of those because I'm making the 72 inch throw. So half of your flying geese are going to go with your A pieces. Half of your flying geese are going to go with your C pieces. Half of these you're going to do nothing for the next step. And then the other half are going to go with all of your half square triangles. So our next step is going to be taking our 2 piles of half square triangles and sewing them together with the one pile, remember we split these in half, but so one of the piles is going to go to here. Now in the directions, it specifically says, make sure that these are pointing properly. So these are touching, this is pointing inward, these are touching, this is pointing inward. And I do recommend double checking every time you come back to this step, because I've messed it up multiple times. Everybody's messed it up multiple times. So first we're going to sew this to this. And what I'm actually going to do is I actually do the next 3 steps. I sew as much as I can every time before I have to press again, because it just takes so long. So I'm going to sew these to this, and then I will show you the next thing I'm going to sew before I even bother pressing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I already split my flying geese in half. One of those piles I'm going to split in half again, and I'm going to sew one of those halves, so really a quarter of all of your flying geese, onto the A pieces, 1 to 1. Make sure that the majority of your smaller triangle is like this, because in the end, you want to have that star. That's how you get that star. So make sure as you're sewing, again, check yourself and make sure you do that. So I'm going to sew these to this, and I'm going to do one more thing before I press everything. So my other half of my flying geese, this is a full 32 for the 72-inch quilt, was paired with my C pieces, which I just split in half also. So I'm going to take the first half of them, sew them to one side of the flying geese. After I press all of that other stuff, I'll come back and I'll sew these to the other side. This, it doesn't matter like how you turn these, they're going to be exactly the same. You can just switch them around super easily. So you don't have to be quite as mindful of this. You're just sewing to the short ends. Okay, so we got this half square triangle onto our FBG piece. Now we're going to take the opposite side one. Again, make sure that the points are going towards the center. And we're going to sew this onto here. So we did one of the flying geese to piece A. We pressed it towards A. Now we're going to sew on the opposite side. Again, every single time, just make sure that your points are doing the right thing. Sew it on, and we will press towards piece A again. And then we sewed a C piece onto one of the flying geese from our other group of flying geese, pressed it towards C. And then we're going to sew this one onto this side, and again, press it towards C. Okay, so we now have both of our half square triangles on the ends of those strips. We have our flying geese on both sides of these A pieces, and now we have C pieces on both sides of the flying geese. So the next thing that we're going to do is start putting the whole block together. Let me see here, I need to zoom out a little bit. Okay, so for one block, see, I almost did that the wrong way again. Let's see. We need 2 of these pieces that we made. We keep one of these. So now in the directions, you will see, if I can put this the right way, that you take one of these and it goes on the top. The other one, you rotate 180 degrees and it goes on the bottom. And we also need 2 of these. And again, just make sure these are matching up and your points are going to the center. So the first thing that we're going to do is sew this to this. We're going to press it away. And then we're going to sew this to this, and we will press it the same. One reason that I press these the way that I do is because your seams will nest when you go to sew them together, and they'll stay. You'll get really, really nice points when you do that. So that's the reason that I try to tell you which way to press, and hopefully I'm correct. Okay, so we have the top and the bottom sewn on. Now we're gonna sew on the left and press, and then the right and press. So we have these two sewn together, and now we're gonna sew this to this and this to this. Again, I know you're gonna like get so sick of hearing me say this, but make sure your points are going in the right direction. This is the home stretch, and this is where I have messed it up. And to get that nice pinwheel effect, you want your points going in the right direction. I promise you want that. Okay, so here is the finished block. Now, depending on which one you're making, you will have a number of these, or if you're just doing the pillow option, you'll just have one.
Okay, so we have all of the blocks assembled so far in the video tutorial. I did the 72-inch throw, so I have 16 quilt blocks. What I do is pretty simple. I just go through and pair up the blocks. So then I had 8 pairs. And I paid attention. I just love nesting seams because I think, especially with the pinwheels, it helps them turn out a lot better. And then your points look really good. So I paid attention to, after I did the pairs, I paid attention to how they were pressed, and then I turned them into rows. So this row, let's see, was all pressed with the seams heading this way. This row was all pressed with the seams the opposite, so that when you put them together, the seams are nested. So after I had the rows, I put 2 rows together, 2 rows together, and then I put those 2 sets of 2 together, and we have the quilt. I haven't quilted it yet. I will soon, but I just wanted to make sure that I got this video out with the pattern so that anybody who enjoys following along the videos can. And like I said, after, if you stick around, this is the baby size quilt that I did doing the fat quarter method. And you can see how it looks kind of random, but the pieces, there's no duplicates. For this, I'm trying to remember, you'll see in the next part, but I kept the A's and the B's together, and I kept pieces that made sense to stay together. So yes, that will be right after this. Again, if you found this helpful, if you have any suggestions, leave a comment, like the video. I would love it if you subscribed. I'm also going to have a couple super simple foundation paper piecing patterns out soon, and those will be super quick videos, which I know a lot of people who are experienced with that might not need it. I mean, you know how to do the 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm enjoying just drawing up patterns and seeing how they turn out. So thank you, and thank you for purchasing the pattern. If you haven't yet and you still like the video, I will have the link in the description. So thanks.
Okay, so excuse my voice because I'm getting over a cold, but this is the little grid that I kind of refer to when I discuss the fat quarter option. And you can see that I am doing a four blocks for this quilt. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 for the different blocks, and then I labeled the pieces also. You can see that there are 7 pieces. However, F and H are going to be in the outermost part of the block, and they're the square and the half square triangles. So I would keep those together when you move them. But yeah, other than that, I am just going to shift everything 1 column to the right. And then after I do that, I'll kind of see if that will work out fine when I figure out what's touching what, because obviously, say you have 6 pieces, leaving the F and the H together, you'll have the same print in one of the blocks. So let me think how I'm going to do that.
Okay, so I decided that what I'm going to do is have A and B stay together because in the normal pattern they're the same color anyways. C and D are going to stay together because in the normal pattern they're the same color. E will move by itself, and then F and H will stay together. But so what you can see here is I have already switched the first set over 1. So E is now going to move over 2 spaces, and then F and H will move over 3 spaces. Okay, so as you can see, because we're doing just shifting them over 1 and then 1 more each time, you get a little diagonal in your grid. That's the easiest way to make sure that you did it right. And the way that I did it, I made sure there's no duplicates. So the color of A and B is not in any of the other colors down in the later rows. I just carefully went down the column and stacked them all up. I took a picture beforehand, so in case I'm getting a little confused, I can go back and look at my photo and know which print was for which block and which letter. And then I also have my solid, all the G's and all the I's for each block. And then you just put it together just like you did any of the other blocks. But like I said, you just have to keep track a little bit more when you want to make sure that it's specifically set up like this. It's scrappy, but it's also kind of has a point to it. It also has a pattern to it.